Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey, everybody, it's Jared. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. Appreciate you being here. And while you're here, definitely ask you to hit the subscribe button and the bell so that you never miss an episode. I'm super excited today. As you can see, have basically a panel of experts. And these guys are all up in Canyon County, Idaho. My old stomping grounds, actually. Grew up in the Idaho area and absolutely love it. So totally jealous of all you guys up there in Idaho, and hope you enjoy it and realize what a blessing it is to be where you are. So today we have Detective Mark Taylor and a couple of attorney types. So Ted Lagerwal, sorry, Ted, and Carson Vito. So these guys were instrumental in helping solve and helping prosecute the Daralyn Johnson case. And if you haven't heard of Daralyn Johnson, she was 9 years old. We're going to get into what happened to her, which was, I'll tell you what, of all the cases and all the types of crime that we talk about on the show and just, crime in general, brutal, just inhumane. How do you even describe this case? But just disgusting acts against a little innocent 9-year-old girl just takes the cake. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So if you have sensitive ears, then maybe this isn't the episode for you. But guys, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're happy to be here.
Thank you.
Well, Mark, let's start with you. Why don't you describe basically what happened? I think I got a pretty tough audience, and so I think they can handle, the details as much as you can get into them without, being, too nasty about it. But I think everybody needs to understand really what a monster this guy was and what he did to Daralyn.
Well, this case started in February 24th of 1982. And Daralyn had left home that morning to go to school. She'd left home by herself, and essentially she did not make it to school that morning. It wasn't until later in the afternoon when she should have been home that her mother learned that she hadn't came home and went to the school to attempt to locate her, and was informed that she didn't make it to school that day, that she hadn't been there. In turn, the police were summoned. A report was filed for missing person, and a search started for her. It wasn't until about 3 days later that her body was discovered about 18 miles south of where she grew up. In an area just south of Melba, Idaho, southeast or southwest of Melba, Idaho, and which borders the Snake River. And her body was found in a natural spring ditch that ran into the Snake River. It was a parking area for boaters, hunters, and et cetera, and people that went there to fish, and this the stream just ran alongside of that parking area, and some kids that were there with their family, one of the boys had ended up locating her body in the water. So with that said, the investigation started as a homicide at that point, and then ended up it ended up where during the investigation, a man was actually arrested and charged in this case, and was in 1983 was found guilty of Daralyn's death, and and he was sentenced to. His name was Charles Fain. Charles was eventually convicted and sentenced to death in this case, and spent 18 years on death row. And it wasn't until some good science came along that was able to compare. There were some hairs involved in this case that were tested at a lab in Bodie Labs in Norton, Virginia. And at that time, they were able to build a profile which Charles Fain's blood was compared to, and essentially it wasn't him. And he was exonerated in this case. And in 2001, that reopened the case, and at which time a detective by the name of Donia Ballard inherited the case and started that over again. And eventually, with some more science, we were able to, it directed us to what ultimately became a Mr. David Dalrymple. And then we were able to do some more testing and able to accurately identify him as the contributor of the DNA samples that we had.
So when you say better science got you there, what year was this that you think there were some breakthroughs?
Well, in 2019 is when the case really took off again, and essentially there were a couple different things that we did in this case. Number one was we had a DNA profile, a mitochondrial profile at Bodie Labs, and essentially I started off the case in about June of 2019, and then in August I contacted Francine Bardole at West Jordan Police Department. We ultimately did use the M-VAC on Daralyn's clothing, her underwear, her pants, and her shirt, and then we collected some M-VAC filters from that process, and then we also did some testing with Dr. Green, Ed Green at the University of California, Santa Cruz.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And so, one of the things that, and unfortunately, Francine Bardole couldn't join us today, but I know she was an integral part of this. How did you meet her? Do you remember?
It just happened chance. I think that I ended up doing some searching on the internet, just trying to look for different ways to work this case and forensics in a sense. And I came across this method, and I thought, with at that time, the evidence that we had in this case, the clothing, it was 38 years later, right? And anyways, we ended up just taking a shot, and the clothing, especially the underwear, had been sent to different labs. There'd been cuttings and swabbings and different things like that, with really no results. And I thought, well, this is our shot, with the M-VAC, that we might be able to at least make an attempt to pull some skin cells or some type of DNA from the underwear. The pants themselves were polyester and had an elastic waistband, and in talking with Francine, that may have been a viable option too, to stretch that waistband and maybe pull some DNA out of there as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Boy, I can't tell you how many times Francine has helped agencies from all over the country to, solve cases that were difficult, that had multiple labs, multiple agencies have had shots at it, whether they did cuttings or swabbings, and then she'll go back behind them with the M-VAC and just absolutely crush it. So she's an expert. It's a like I said, it's a bummer. She's super busy with her family right now, so couldn't drag her away, but want to definitely give her a shout out, because she can work absolute miracles with our DNA collection system there. So, well, Ted, what so once you saw that Mark had some evidence and things were progressing in the case, is that kind of where you came in?
So I didn't come in until 2022 when this case was already charged. So I was assigned the case. And basically, just a little bit, just even follow up on with Mark and the work of Francine. So back in 1982, when Daralyn's body was found, when they found her face down in this stream, there's clear evidence she had been raped when they turned her over, and she had blood on her pants. The investigation focused on, they were able to recover some pubic hairs from her underwear. There were 2 pubic hairs from her underwear and a pubic hair from her socks. And those hairs, it's just fascinating because this is in 1982 and there's no DNA evidence. It didn't exist in 1982. So what they were dealing with was microscopic hair comparisons, and that is the microscopic hair comparisons. That was what was used to basically convict Charles Fain with a couple other pieces of evidence. But to speak to what Francine did, so you start back in 1982, the FBI did examinations of the underwear, her clothing, unsuccessful in identifying any type of semen or anything on that underwear. And that's in 1982, 1983. It was tested by no state lab. You're going to trial. People are, again, no DNA around, so there's stapled, exhibit stickers on the underwear. When Charles Fain was cleared in 2001, it was right before that. There was an alternate light source test that was done, unsuccessful with Idaho State Lab looking, basically 7 different tests. Bodie doing more cuttings and looking for touch DNA. Idaho State Lab looking at it again, took a section, just weren't able to get the results. And so this case was fascinating as the prosecutors. Carson and I and 2 other prosecutors were on this case. It's a culmination of science and the development of science. The development of science, DNA starts getting introduced to the courtrooms, unsuccessful in gathering information on this case, but eventually the hairs, mitochondrial DNA, cleared Charles Fain, and then DNA was used to, that's where Dr. Green came in, whole genome sequencing. He was able to get, people forever thought you could not get nuclear DNA from hair. And he was able to get the sequencing out. They used genetic genealogy to trace. And then that was ultimately used to identify a potential suspect. And that's where Investigator Taylor, Mark just picked this case up and dug and dug in. But so by the time we get this case, we're dealing with brand new DNA science using whole genome sequencing, and just the work that Francine did. We're talking 7 different testings, multiple touching throughout the process, obviously going back that many years. And she was able to pull out through those filters. It really helped us at trial and helped us with supporting the other science that was used. It's new science as well, which is using whole genome sequencing. So it was phenomenal. But that's where we were. Our big job as prosecutors was to put this all back together and figure out every place all this evidence went and go through all the testing process. So it was just a fascinating case to work on. Horrific set of circumstances. The parents are gems. So is Daralyn's sister. They are the nicest people, and it was just something that we spent countless hours digging and putting this case together, which was the science is what helped us. That drove this case. If it wasn't for the science, that we wouldn't be talking to you, and Daralyn's killer would not have received justice. So that was the big thing. Just stepping into the case.
Yeah. It's like I said at the very beginning, everything I've read about it, and I haven't seen any crime scene photos or anything like that, but I'm sure you guys, you weren't even the the officers responding there. I can't imagine the trauma that they went through just seeing this poor girl's body and everything. So,
To throw this out, we're very fortunate, even at the time during the autopsy, that the evidence that we had to use today was actually collected. I mean, there were some things that didn't go well over 40 years, right, with evidence, but we were very, very fortunate that we still had the clothing and the hairs to be able to use the test foot. So that was pretty awesome.
well, and I know cases like this, it's the sheer fact that they were solved, period, I think gives a lot of people hope, because there's still, what, 250,000 cold case homicides out there that folks are still trying to solve. And, I think it's super important also to remind everybody that investigators like you guys never give up. And that's one of the things that I think is heartening as well, is that no matter how long it takes, if there's any chance of solving the case, folks like you guys and Francine, you guys are just relentless and like a bulldog with a bone, just, never give up. And it's, to me, that's what, especially America is all about, just understanding that we have our systems of laws, and that there are dedicated professionals that are just determined to solve every possible case that we possibly can. So I just love it. I love talking about these type of cases and getting feedback from guys like you that are just absolutely amazing. So, Carson, what was your role in all of this?
Yeah, my role was kind of interesting. So I came onto the case later. We had some turnover in the office, just neutral turnover in the office. And so Ted had approached me sometime around October 2023, I want to say. We were getting ready to do an evidentiary hearing, trying to get our science pre-approved by the court. Ended up not going super well, but he approached me before that hearing, asking me to jump in. He needed another prosecutor to help out. So around October, November 2023, I came onto the case to help Ted and the other prosecutors and Detective Taylor help put it all together. So my role was basically to help support Ted in putting it together, and he siphoned off some of the witnesses, some of the investigation over to me. I actually I got to meet Francine. Francine was one of my witnesses, as well as Danielle Reed with Bodie Technology in testing the M-VAC filters. Those were my witnesses. And Ted took on the Herculean and unenviable task of introducing Dr. Green's testimony with the whole genome sequencing, which was a project in and of itself. So I took on the more traditional DNA testing. So that was kind of my role, was to do the M-VAC filters and the STR, and I ended up doing a couple of fact witnesses as well. So.
Nice. So is this your first M-VAC case?
This was my first DNA case, my first homicide case, my first M-VAC case. There was a lot of firsts for me. Yep.
All right. Well, I wasn't going to assume you were fresh out of law school, but there you go.
Fresher. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully it definitely won't be the last. You'll be able to be an expert from this point forward.
Yeah, it's looking that way. I took on, let's see, after the verdict here, I think I'm on five homicide cases right now. So yeah, it didn't take long to start down that road, but I'm excited for it. So
nice. So give me something unique about maybe prepping either Francine or the analyst out of Bodie that you thought was kind of unique that you hadn't seen before.
Prepping Francine. Yeah, but Francine was great. She was super responsive, super flexible with her schedule. What we ended up doing, it was Ted's idea, and it was a great idea. We went onto the M-VAC website and just clipped a short video of how the collection works, because I knew how it worked, and Francine could explain how it worked, but there was just something that I'm pretty sure after the trial, one of the jurors, at least one of the jurors, told us that they appreciated it. But we just showed him a video of how it worked, and we would just pause it, and we would have Francine on the stand. What are we looking at here? What does this do? What does that do? And so the visual of the M-VAC process, I thought, was particularly helpful. And it was also unique. I had never had an expert witness be able to pause and play a video showing the testing that they're doing. And I think a lot of the case was so heady, and it was so heavy with science that to give the jurors actually something that they could see and understand, it's so much more sophisticated than a carpet cleaner. But at some point, there's a likeness there, and so to give the juror something palpable and tangible like that, I thought was super helpful. And the prep process was simple, being able to see it and visualize what it was Francine was doing.
We did that off of fair use because we took it off the internet. It's used in a public courtroom, but we had to clip out faces. I'm not even sure. I'm not sure. Have you done something that you've put up on YouTube yourself?
Oh yeah, I'm so plastered all over our
it's you because I'm looking at you. I'm like, I think it's him. So sorry, you are a headless horseman in this case. Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah. So it was, we had to try to clip you out, and we just did different angles and different things. And so that, yeah, I do. I agree with Carson. I mean, he did great with her interacting with that video, but there's not much out there, like in terms of prosecutors using this. I mean, I've done tons of murder cases. I've never done an M-VAC case ever. And so I didn't even know what it was. And it was fast. Mark is the one who had to sit down and explain to me what exactly what is it? How did you come across this? And it was very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, fortunately you guys live in an area that, there's not a ton of cases that would warrant the M-VAC, but, yeah, places like Florida and Texas, it's being used a lot. And, yeah. Go ahead.
One of the more, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, I think one of the most remarkable things in this case is that Daralyn's body was about half submerged in water. And to be able to, and when you have something like that where she's still submerged in water and 38 or 39 years later, we're still able to find some sort of DNA that's left in that clothing. It's pretty amazing. And
yeah, so was the current pretty slow where she was at?
Yeah, it was very slow. It was just a trickle through there. And there's an old video, a crime scene video that they made. You can hear the water just trickling through there.
Okay. Yeah, that's really fortunate that we've had another case, actually it was here in Utah, where the victim was submerged for I think around 18 hours, but it was kind of in it wasn't really fast moving creek, but it was moving a little faster. But she was only in there 18 hours. So that was fortunate that, I hadn't washed away all of the DNA, but yeah, and especially fresh water, it doesn't, degrade the DNA quite as quickly. So that's a real advantage. When it's fresh water and it's not moving very fast, then it doesn't degrade the DNA nearly as quickly, like what salt water or a fast moving creek would. So in this case, by God's grace, it wasn't, those kind of circumstances. So able to get DNA there. If there's DNA, the good thing about the M-VAC that I found, and obviously I think this is one of those cases, is that if there is DNA there, the M-VAC will normally get it. So, just really, really blessed. It sounds like with Daralyn's case. So,
yeah,
you guys,
so
go ahead.
No, I was going to say that was interesting because she was in the water for 3 days. So it's got February 24th to February 27th, and talking about the long time period that this underwear had been examined repeatedly. It was interesting that and this was the other thing that I thought the M-VAC filters really came into play, is that initially it was being used to compare using YSTR testing, so doing the mitochondrial, what you inherit from mom, and that was the first testing, and that's what Mark was using, was trying to establish a connection to the pubic hairs, and so thought, well, maybe if there's something taken from the underwear, we can make a comparison to see is the mitochondrial in there, and it didn't work out where they were able to do that at that time. But here's another thing: is that at the same time, Star Mix is being used in the DNA world, and Star Mix is a program that's, I'm sure you're familiar with. Its ability to deconvolute mixtures and be able to give the probabilities or likelihood ratios if there is a mixture. And that was something that was decided after we got this case and after we had the whole genome sequencing, which is a whole nother topic of brand new science. It was great because we had whole genome sequencing identifying 4 hairs that came back to this guy, had never been introduced in the United States ever. And so this is the first time in the United States that gets introduced. And so going in, knowing that this is so brand new, the M-VAC filters, Star Mix was used, and bingo, he comes into that mixture. And so it was evidence that standalone was overwhelmingly strong, and it helped back up the other evidence that we had. So it's just so important. And it's just amazing that even what you're doing now, there's things that we can't even see into the future, that this is just going to keep advancing. And this is like a testament to that case. Like, oh my gosh, like, thank goodness, like Mark said, they collected what they did, preserved it. And there was attempts all throughout, but eventually science caught up with this guy and buried him. So that was, yeah, I just wanted to just put that angle in, and that's what Carson's saying, like the DNA evidence. He doesn't understand. Star Mix is used across the United States, but I came from Chicago prosecuting there. There's only a handful of those cases that were done, and it's still being litigated and fought. And so this was able to back up both sciences, which was awesome. It was so beneficial in this case. I can't speak to what the jury was thinking, but I'm sure, this really helped out and to solidify everything, because it was overwhelming evidence against the defendant.
Did you guys get much feedback actually from the jury on what was kind of the finals, or what determined the guilty plea, or the not plea, but the guilty verdict?
Yeah, we did have the opportunity. All 3 of us talked to the jurors at different points. And we just got to be careful, because you're just getting little bits and pieces from different people, and we just got to be careful, because just to honor their decisions and what they want to say publicly and things like that. But they shared with the defense and with us. But it's, we just have to be cautious, because we don't want to publish or make public what the jury said.
Of course,
on this case without that, so it respect the question, but we just got to be a little careful, just to preserve the case and fairness.
Yeah. Well, who wants to actually describe this, the defendant, Daryl or David, is it Dalrymple?
Dalrymple, yes.
What do we know about him?
Well, he's currently, he just had a birthday. I believe he's 67 years old now. He grew up in Nampa, Idaho, in the same general location as where Daralyn grew up, as a matter of fact. He grew up in a family that consisted of 4 boys and 2 girls, and eventually he was essentially a kind of a rebel growing up, and doing a lot of crazy, wild things as a kid. He eventually was the subject of some criminal complaints over his youth and into his young adult life, and then essentially ended up in prison in I believe 2003 for a crime involving another girl, and this little girl was about 11 years old at the time when she had finally disclosed what Mr. Dalrymple had been doing to her. And anyway, he was convicted for, I believe, a sexual battery, a kidnapping, and a lewd conduct, and was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Once we were able to identify him as the potential suspect, we at least knew where to find him.
Yeah, that it's interesting how our system works. And Ted, maybe you can explain this a little bit better. That during the actual trial, uh, the defendant's history can't really be brought into, correct?
That's true. So with the jury trial, the the courts do not allow prior bad conduct unless it has some relation, and there's some certain categories that fit within that. But the fact that he's been previously convicted, that's across the country. It's not unique to Idaho, but it's in pretty much every state court. You can't just introduce that the fact that he has a criminal past, therefore he committed this crime. So when the trial happened, that was not mentioned to the jury. There was nothing that was brought up that mentioned that at all. But I think what's interesting is after sentencing, and this came out publicly, is at the sentencing hearing, that little girl, that it started when she was 7 years old, that the case that he's in for serving time, and she obviously has grown up and she's a young adult woman. She came in and just gave a very impactful testimony about being terrorized and being repeatedly abused by this defendant. And I can say that the court in its ruling made repeated references to that. So it was very, I believe it had an effect on the judge just by what he said at his sentencing. But the other part that I think, and I'm not trying to toss it out or to lead this, but Mark actually, interviewed the defendant, and that came out publicly during the trial as well. That interview process, and it was very. I think he has more insights about the defendant, and this particularly as to this case, because he was only, let's see, he was 24. Do I have that right? 25. I think he was 24 when this happened. Turned 25 later. Yes. So the defendant was 24, but there was just compelling testimony that he not only grew up there, but he also was. We introduced evidence that he was living in that neighborhood at the time that Daralyn went missing, just down from the school, houses away. I mean, 4, 5, 6 houses away from the school where she would walk to.
I don't know about you guys, but of all the cases that I've seen, across the country, to me, it seems that the sexual assault type of cases, especially against children, are in many ways more damaging than even a homicide, just because of it's almost like the ripple effect, the long lasting, just it not only affects that person, but that person's family, and it just reverberates through generations, and the trauma that they experience, sometimes it causes them to turn around and be predators themselves. And it just, to me, I think, honestly, I think society would be a lot better if we focused more on these sexual predators and these sexual deviances and assaults and rapes and everything else, just because of that. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but that's just kind of my opinion.
I've worked a lot of cases like that over the years. I can tell you in this case, I'm very proud of the young lady that came forward and testified in our sentencing hearing. She's a pretty strong young lady, and I think she's really. I can't say that she's overcame some of the damage that's been done to her, but she is definitely living a good life. And there was a second person that testified as well in our sentencing hearing, and that was the mother another young lady that I found that was reportedly victimized by Mr. Dalrymple, and kind of in the same age range. She wasn't able to testify, but the judge allowed her mother to testify for us in the sentencing hearing, and I can tell you that the similarities are very much the same. I don't know why or what prompted Mr. Dalrymple to commit the crime that he did against Daralyn Johnson, other than maybe a crime of opportunity. I don't know. I can't answer that. But he was certainly familiar with the area, which gave him an advantage. He was familiar with the school. We knew that kids would walk by the home where he lived. He was very familiar with the rural areas around Nampa, and that, I mean, he grew up there. And so he just had an advantage in this situation. The behavior is very deviant. One of my frustrations throughout the case and just learning everything was that it's my personal opinion that I believe he knew. He knew that Mr. Fain had been arrested for this crime, and he knew that Mr. Fain was sentenced to death. And there could have been a high likelihood that Mr. Fain was going to be executed, and he didn't have to worry about ever being caught. He knew also that Mr. Fain was exonerated from this case, and so I don't know that the first time I met with him is if it was really a surprise that I would be there asking certain questions and asking for his help in helping me solve this case. But, it was a long interview, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Well, to me, again, that just shows, I mean, not only is this guy so sick and deranged that he would do something like that to, a 9-year-old girl, but then, what a coward to just, he knows another guy is sitting in prison who's innocent, and he's sitting in prison based on something he did. And yet he was okay with that. Just let him go. If he takes the fall for what I got away with, then so be it. Oh geez. I hope he never sees the light of day again.
No, not with 2 life sentences now.
Yeah.
So
He's got 2 life sentences. I mean, and just so that it's clear, he is appealing those. So there's an appeal process pending. So he is denying, that he has anything to do with this. So that's where legally it sits right now. But yes, he received a double life sentence.
Well, based on the appeal, is there a way that the appeals court, will they just have to make a ruling on it, or do you have to go through the whole trial again?
They don't go through the whole trial, but they will review his claims. He will be represented by an attorney, and there's claims that he's making, and that process has begun. But as far as where it's going to end up, or what are going to be the final issues, or what the appellate court's going to look at, or how they'll do that, they don't redo the hearing, but they review trial testimony, transcripts, and go through filings and what was done and decisions made by the court. But that process, just like that happens a lot in criminal cases, especially in murder cases, that appeal is pending. So we just got to make that clear, just so that it's out there that is the posture of the case. We're done at the trial level. It's done. He's convicted. He's sentenced. He has been sentenced to prison, and he's going through the appeal process.
Yeah, well, like I said, our system is pretty fair to even give this guy an appeal, but like I said, hopefully, it's unfortunate. I really wanted to be there for, especially the sentencing. My sister got married that day, though, so I didn't think I should skip the wedding to be up there.
Priority.
Yeah, priorities, yes.
Yeah, for sure. But Well, guys, any last thoughts on the case and how it all unfolded?
It was an experience. Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful for all the work, all the science, Detective Taylor, Ted, and I would be remiss. I think Ted would too if we didn't give a little shout out to. We had an internal investigator, Dave Krawczyk, who was instrumental in helping Ted piece it together, flying and or taking pieces of evidence to be tested, specifically with Dr. Green. So yeah, it was Ted kept telling me throughout the whole case that this was not a normal homicide case to be working. And like I said, it was my first homicide trial. So it was quite an experience to come out the gates with, but definitely thankful for having done it. It was 27 days of testimony, 52 witnesses, months and months of preparation. So it was definitely an experience, but specifically to Francine, the M-VAC filters, and Danielle Reed, it was just, I hope every trial I have going forward is as smooth with experts that are as knowledgeable and flexible, because it was just really, really, once we knew where we were going, it was really simple to get there and we had all the pieces lined up. So it was just a really team effort.
Yeah, you know what, Carson, I'm just thinking about, with all the years that you're going to be practicing and, the technology that's going to be improving during that period is going to be pretty amazing to see.
I'd throw out there, obviously, I mean, there's like, even the three of us, we're standing on the shoulders of other people that did work. And so we just pushed the ball forward. But I think one of the things that I take away from this even separate and apart from this case, is just the getting the word out to investigators. I think it's really important. I prosecuted in Chicago, so that's where I did like about almost 25 years there before I came out here. And I don't know how many, the word is still getting out about that process. And I just think it was really, really critical and very helpful in our case. And so I think that's an investigative tool that just needs to be, known, that in the right circumstances, right situation, right piece of evidence. And again, I'm not an expert on it, so I can't even speak to that. But I think that needs to get out there. And then also at the same time, I think there's a lot of investigators that have no idea that hair evidence or old bones, that there's this process of whole genome sequencing, that where maybe cold cases, there's DNA that can't be worked, or the limitations of standard DNA. This is brand new, and I don't think a large majority of the country has any clue that that's out there. So we're hoping both of those things, and it was a very unique experience to see how it supported each other. And as to the science, just prosecuting this case, I think there was just important things like it's the science and it helped solve the case, right? There was dedication and hours, but it's the science that solved it and was able to guide Mark onto the right path of like here. And he built a great case after he got the tip of who did this. And then that science was able to convince a jury, which was great. And then lastly, we did have a case where there was somebody that was wrongfully convicted. And, there's always murmuring and whispers of like, did he do it or did he do something else? This guy was wholly innocent. And that puts this to bed, that this is the right person, and that there was justice for him, and basically his pleas of innocence, and the fact that he was cleared was really important. But most importantly out of all of it was this poor family, just to be able, honestly, it was an honor to work with them sitting behind us, the whole way through, and they finally saw justice. It's easy to talk about these cases. It's hard to really think about the family and what they've gone through in this whole saga. She finally, I think, at least as to finding the killer, I think the family now has peace that the right person is there. They've got the killer, and it's that assurance. That's so powerful because, right before we were about to begin this trial, the dad, he wanted to know from me, said, Ted, I want to know, are we, positive this is the right guy? Not questioning anything. He's just asking that question. And if you take a second to think about it, this is the father who's gone through, and the wrong person went to prison and has gone through this whole process. But just to be able to have that assurance, the science, and if it wasn't for both pegs of this, it is very easy now to tell the family, yes, that's why we're proceeding with this. We believe we can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, and the jury agreed.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't even thought about that, Ted, because I hadn't even thought about that. This family, Daralyn's family, has actually gone through this twice. They thought they had her killer the first time and then found out that was wrong. I'm sure there was some, I can't imagine that. I mean, horrible feelings about that. Some guy, innocent guys being in prison. And then all of a sudden they are going through it again with, I can imagine him asking that question. Yeah. You sure you got the right guy this time? So it's, yeah, that's a whole nother aspect of it.
Yeah. And the one other thing, and I know Mark is sitting right here, but honestly, both prongs of the evidence, but when Mark got on, the whole genome sequencing was used to do genetic genealogy, to trace. But Mark, it's good to have it, not good. It's great to have investigators that are willing to keep digging and keep going. And Mark, on a two-prong from science, he's the one that called up the scientist directly and said, "Hey, this whole genome sequencing, you're able to get this to run for genealogy. Can you make a comparison?" And that has just exploded open a wide, a door, to get that in. And at the same time, he's the one who takes the underwear where it's just dead end. And he's willing to push the envelope and say, "Hey, I'll drive this stuff down to you. Can you test it?" And then did it, and was clawing for funding and doing anything he can. And that's huge. If it wasn't an investigator pushing that science, it's just, again, the science is what ultimately, was what the jury relied on. But Mark is a guy, and that's what we need investigators out there doing, is what else can I do? Don't stop, don't quit. That's just another part of this case that's just unbelievable. And I'm sure Carson agrees. All the prosecution team agrees. Like, this is, I mean, we were at the end of this, at the funnel, putting this all together, and it was a pleasure trying a case where you had that kind of attitude. It's just phenomenal.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned it. In close, and I tried to shout out as many people as I could. And Jared, you said it at the beginning. It was just a relentless pursuit. We were not going to let this go, and it all finally came together. And then I guess also on behalf of the team, a shout out to M-VAC. My understanding is that the West Jordan Police Department only had 2 filters for Francine to use on this case, and it wasn't enough in her expertise, and she was right. And I believe M-VAC donated 6 or 7 filters so that she could do a full analysis of the pants, the shirt, and the underwear. And we ended up getting profiles. We didn't send in the shirt ones, but we ended up sending in the pants and the underwear to get those filters. So I don't know what we would have done with only 2 filters, how she would have prioritized, or what we maybe wouldn't have gotten. So a big thanks to M-VAC for that as well.
Honestly, it was our honor to do it. Especially being an Idaho boy, when Francine called me about this case, and it was really Francine that pushed it. She was like, "Hey, is there anything you guys can do to help us out with this? Donating some of the consumables to make this happen." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So, pretty small little section of it, but we are honored to do it.
Well, thank you for that. I'm humbled by the whole case itself. I can tell you, for any investigators that listen to this podcast, there's options out there, and I think thinking out of the box a little bit. But in this particular case, we were able to, like Ted said, we were able to tie 2 different avenues of DNA for the suspect. And for me, I would prefer if I don't have the evidence and I can't prove that, I don't want somebody going to prison. I never want to be responsible for somebody going to prison that didn't commit a crime. In this particular case, I have no doubt who committed the crime, and we have two different avenues that show that clearly. And the science is there; it's only going to get better, and we're able to solve crimes they're decades old now, and that's the wonderful part about it. And I don't, there's so many people that we could thank along the way that have done this. Donia Ballard, the person that had this case before I inherited it, that woman never gave up. She inherited this case after Charles Fain was exonerated, and she never stopped. And she continually just looked at one person after the next, and so all the folks, and I mentioned to you on the phone the other day, Jared, that I truly believe that there's some inspiration involved in this whole process. Having the prosecution team that we had, the people that were involved in the science part of it, and everything else is truly a testament to where we're at, and I feel very confident in everybody's skills that participated in this case. And in M-VAC, I can tell you, yeah, I have another cold case right now. I just used M-VAC on again, and that case is a decade old right now. So I'm hoping to get some evidence out of that, and that will help our case. So
Absolutely awesome. Appreciate all you guys coming on, and most importantly, Daralyn, rest in peace, and that she is finally able to get justice. And I hope prayers with her family, that they can also have as much closure as possible, be able to move on from this and lead good lives. But gentlemen, I appreciate your time, and yeah, it's as the president of M-VAC Systems, as well as the host of this show, it's just such an honor to be able to talk to investigators like you guys and be able to actually say, yeah, you know what, our system is actually doing amazing work out there. And it's just exciting to be a part of it.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.